please? Really loud, woohoo!
All right, thanks everybody for coming. We really appreciate it. I'm here, Peter Irwin is my name. I'm with Spot by NetApp. I'm Director of Global Partnerships, and we're here with our friends from Tealium, a longtime customer and user of Spot. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how they operationalize FinOps and put it into practice using some of our tools and their bright minds. So just as an introduction, Spot is a set of FinOps tools that provide continuous cost optimization to support applications running in the cloud. From automating optimal commitment strategies to efficient auto-scaling for complex cloud-native infrastructure, Spot has the tools to ensure your applications are highly available and always running at the lowest possible cost. With that, I'm going to invite Ricky and Capen to introduce themselves. So Ricky, go ahead.
Yeah, pleasure meeting you all. My name is Ricky Ibarra. I am the FinOps lead at Tealium, so responsible for all cloud and software spend. Been at the firm for about 3.5 years now as a career change from a quantitative finance to actual FinOps position. So.
My name is Capen Brinkley, SRE manager, architect for Tealium. I've been there about 7.5 years, so I've seen a lot of growth over the 7.5 years I've been there. I'm really excited to share with you guys the last 3 years of our FinOps journey.
Awesome. Click forward. So Tell us a little bit about Tealium first. What do you guys do? What's your business?
Yeah, so Tealium, who are we? What do we do? So Tealium specializes in transforming our clients' customer data platforms from fragmented, disparate systems with siloed data stores that take a lot of heavy lifting and arduous amounts of effort to connect with their customers to what you see here, a cohesive, well-organized workflow that allows businesses to connect with their customers like never before. So how do we do that? Now, we do that by creating a vendor-agnostic platform that allows our clients to collect data via multiple sources, create unique workflows to transform and enrich that data so it can be activated to service clients in a compliant fashion that honors both the privacy and consent regulations that exist in the market today. So we handle a large amount of data day out and day in and day out for our customers. Now, without going too deep into the details, but to give you a relative idea of how much volume we handle, we do as many inbound and outbound events and actions as Google does searches in a day. So with that in mind, it's fair to say that the infrastructure that we put in place to manage those interactions is quite sizable and costly on a daily basis. Now, we at Tealium are also very cost conscious and about how we manage that infrastructure. Now, in ops, me being the SRE, Ricky's got the finance side of it, of course, we're viewed as a cost center. So we work very hard to optimize that cost for both the business and our customers. And that's the basis for how this journey began for us.
Well, it sounds like you guys have a very large, complex, really dynamic environment. A lot of demanding performance requirements, customer-facing applications. How do you start with FinOps in a world like that?
Well, thanks, Peter. That's a wonderful question. I'm going to answer that for you. So I'm going to go through that in this timeline here, and I'm going to detail it in kind of our phases of maturity and what we call our crawl, walk, and run phases. So like many others, prior to June 2020, we had already rolled out auto-scaling to many of our data processing tiers with rudimentary forms of scaling. So that would include like static or manual scaling. We had some forms of time-based scaling and some basic performance indicators such as aggregate CPU across the tier. So in order to continue optimizing those costs, we found Spot Elastic Groups, which helped us reach the next big milestone in savings by leveraging multiple instances across the Spot market and doing those together, instead of trying to do on-demand or try to forecast RIs or anything like that. So big advantage there. So during this time, we had already been running Docker workloads. However, we were only running them on a single EC2 instance running that container tier. We had maybe a few little sidecars added onto that for like monitoring and then things for like enhanced telemetry so we could do advanced scaling with that. But that was it. So the result of that was we were wasting resources and money by not doing any form of container orchestration or benefiting from bin packing. So container orchestration became our next adventure in our journey. So the architecture team landed on Amazon's EKS or Elastic Kubernetes service. So to further enhance that, we added Spot Ocean to get the benefit of, yet again, multiple instance types and being able to go across the pool of resources that were available to us there. So the next two steps of the timeline here, so when you begin the EKS migration and then the right sizing portion of it, so we had a couple hiccups and things along the way that we had to learn and get through. And the two of those, Ricky will talk about a third one. One was running a standalone container versus running an orchestrated pod was two totally separate things. So the resources required to run one versus another was never the same. It was almost always we were able to shrink that footprint of that container and again get additional bin packing on top of that, but that took some time to learn that. So also our configuration systems between the two drastically differed. So we had to spend a lot of effort and pretty much run every migration through a fine-tooth comb to make sure we didn't miss anything or there would be unintended consequences or impact to the customer. So by mid-2022, we were really finding our groove with that, and we were looking for our next phase of our platform and cost optimizations. Well, Graviton presented that next frontier of those savings. So we started out by migrating other non-EKS managed services in AWS, so things like managed streaming for Kafka, relational database service, and Elasticache for Redis. Now, what those migrations allowed us to do was validate the cost savings that we were expecting to see out of Graviton. So that worked really well for us. So the next phase of that was to basically go with our standalone workloads that had either not been migrated due to complexity or they just weren't candidates because the product teams had other priorities that they had to focus on. One of those such tiers happened to be our most critical caching tier. So what we realized pretty quickly with that was in most regions and cases with this particular tier, we had to run the largest network optimized instances of Graviton. And so the result of that is they're not necessarily the most popular instances because of their specialized nature. So AWS doesn't necessarily have a large fleet of those compared to something that is a little bit more in the mainstream for people to use. So we ended up hitting a situation where we were doing a proactive scaling event, and that was the fortunate piece for us because there was no impact to the customer, but we ran out of capacity. There was no available instances left to provision. Now, our team did a really fantastic job of rolling back to our Intel-based images. So the fortunate byproduct of this that was just a total unintended consequence was we actually found ourselves being able to run hybrid clusters between ARM and Intel. And while there were slight performance differences and cost differences between the two, there was no noticeable impact to the customer, so we were able to run it seamlessly. And in our regular meetups with Peter and the Spot team, we basically told them of our practice of being able to run both architectures and flip back and forth between the two with relative ease. So they really liked this practice. A couple meetings later, they came back to us. They asked if we were interested in doing a beta to run a multi-architecture platform on Spot Ocean. And needless to say, that beta went really well. So Spot Ocean offers multiple images within virtual node groups. And starting in July, we will be fully up and on multi-architecture Spot Ocean clusters. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, really, thanks for sharing that journey with us. As you've gone through all these technical changes and architecture changes from standalone containers to EKS to multi, AMI architecture, were these driven by cost or performance, or how did these, what was that path, and how did you stay optimized through that journey?
Yeah, so it's a really great question, but it's kind of a multifaceted answer. There's a lot that goes into it. So Tealium is very financially disciplined. They do a really great job at it. So ultimately, I'm going to have to say that cost is what drives a lot of what you see in this progress here. Ricky will elaborate more, but basically we do a weekly cost optimization meeting, and that drives a lot of what you see here. But there's other factors, right? So there's market trends, right? So market trends like container orchestration. Now, I feel personally we were a little late to that game, but I think we did a really good job with our migration, and we were able to realize some great cost savings by taking that pattern. So again, it's trends in the market. Where are we going with that? What's the next innovation or enhancement with the infrastructure? And then obviously we would find things in the product that we could work with the product teams to basically optimize performance, do better bin packing, shrink our footprint, save costs, but ultimately I think cost was the driver of what we did. It's just the way we, our discipline at Tealium.
That's awesome.
So,
well, thanks for sharing that. This is a great technical view of the architecture and how things have moved. With that, we're going to move over to Ricky here to tell us about the money here. So tell us a little bit about the financial impacts of all these changes and how that really impacted your business.
Yeah, so as Capen elaborated, cost reduction was one of the driving factors into some of the architectural decisions that we just talked about in the last slide. But as a team, as we're brainstorming cost optimization ideas, us FinOps folks are often asked the question as to, will this project save us money, and if so, how much? And it's really our responsibility to be able to answer this question early on in the process so we can deliver a high return on our invested time, right? Engineering resources are extremely expensive, so we want to make sure we're always getting value-add projects out of their contribution. But in a cloud environment, it's really hard to answer that question when there's a lot of variables that determine the price of something. So at Tealium, we try our best to normalize all units of measure. For example, this chart here that you're looking on the slide, this displays the results of 6 of the projects that Capen just walked us through, but as a percentage of pricing for all EC2 normalized units. And essentially, the more blue on the chart is a good thing because Spot delivers the highest discount rates in comparison to some of the other pricing options. Now, I know there's some exceptions like 3-year all-up fronts for savings plans and RIs, but these can be a huge cash burden depending on the liquidity of your firm, right? One thing that's often overlooked is savings plan and RIs require a lot of cash invested today so you can achieve some fixed percentage of savings in the future. And that's with the assumption that your engineering team is not making instance type changes in the future, or else you're going to be in a double spending period if those changes happen before the maturity date of that commit, right? But as we continued our journey with the EKS migration, expanding our availability pool, and began shifting instances to Graviton, we were able to realize an increase of 19 percentage points to our overall Spot usage. So we started off at 36% in September of 2022, and by April of 2023, we reached 55% of total EC2 usage running on Spot pricing. And this decreases the pool of RIs and savings plan and keeps our on-demand almost close to zero. So what does that do to our actual cash outlay, right? By Spot pricing, the advantage is that you're paying the discounted rate today for what you use and as you use it. So now you can already start to understand what that actually does to your cash flow and your cash burn. And this is actually not the end result because this does not include the latest dual AMI project that Capen mentioned is going to be completed next month. So let's keep designing profitable software, right? So let's keep going. So we know Spot delivers the highest discount rate, but Spot pricing is variable, and there's different probable outcomes on the pricing you achieve. So how do you actually measure that? So the chart here on the right is our cost per normalized unit, which I believe is the best form of measurement when looking at EC2 instance scaling. Now, I know cost per hour is often used, but with vertical scaling, an instance is always measured in 24 hours regardless of its size. Let me give you an example. So an EC2 that is size 2XL running all day is measured as 24 hours, but if you're running a 16XL running all day is also measured in 24 hours. So you can imagine how that KPI can actually provide misleading results when you're trying to measure the results, the financial impact of your different architectural changes. So at Tealium, our optimization efforts resulted in a 20% improvement in our cost per normalized unit. And for our business, and I'm sure many of yours, EC2 is the majority of our monthly spend, so you can already imagine a 20% improvement result in a lot of money, right? But I will say, and I think Capen can agree with me on this one, that achieving 20% improvement is not a smooth process. We encountered a couple hiccups along the way. So for starters, we realized that early on shifting our components to EKS, we would result in losing visibility into our billing tag reporting. Because I work on the finance side, I rely on this for accounting and cost allocation. So we explored several third-party solutions, but nothing really quite fit our operating model, or they were just way too expensive. But luckily, because we're a NetApp Spot Ocean product user, we were able to get granular data, which is namespace, and different labels, which is essentially the same thing as a billing tag. I can merge that with my AWS CUR report, recreate my automated dashboards, and I solved the problem at zero cost. Another gotcha is the double spending period during the cutover, right? So during the migration process, we needed to keep old infrastructure running for a few days, just as good practice and as a fail-safe, until we can actually validate the performance of our operational changes. So we need to factor that double spending period into the budget, but it's really hard to predict the future footprint of something running onto EKS. Another finding that Capen mentioned was that Graviton nodes were not available in all regions, and the spot market was actually quite limited due to high demand. So essentially, the rule of thumb is when you shift to Graviton, you realize 20% price improvement. That's only true if you're running on RIs or on demand, because like I said, spot pricing could be quite variable. So we relied on a cost per normalized unit as a KPI to be able to track this, which is how we ended up focusing so much on continuing to expand our availability pool.
Those two things seem really impactful. I mean, that's no small chunk of change at your guys' scale and complexity. Were there other benefits, though, you realized from this? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, at Tealium, when I came on board and helped build out the FinOps practice, we really built a cost-conscious operating model. So even though system performance is always priority number one, we're always working towards margin improvement. And by operating in this manner, the projects that we discussed allowed us for really advantageous opportunity for us that were quite unexpected, actually. So the chart here is the correlation between our volume KPI, which we call income and events, so that's the orange line there. And the blue line is our EC2 spend in all of our production environments. So what's interesting is that before November of 2022, there was really no pattern between the two metrics, right? Variance month over month was really drastic. So this made it really difficult for us to forecast our spend. But as we optimized, as we right-sized and did all these different enhancements, we unlocked the opportunity to improve our forecasting model by predicting our spend in correspondence to how our system actually behaves. So in theory, a 1% increase in volume equates to a 1% increase in cost.
I've heard a lot this week from talking to customers and partners about forecasting being a major challenge in FinOps. So how do you take this data and use it? Who sees it, and has it helped you make better decisions along the way?
Yeah, so with this advantage here, it really unlocks a few other opportunities that I have listed out on the right. I talked about improving forecasting. Just two examples I can quickly give is, at Tealium, we were looking at our operating margins by region. We've realized that the resources that we're using are a lot more cost effective to operate in Oregon in comparison to Virginia. So what we can look at is the growth rate of our income and events per data center, and we realize that if Virginia is growing at a faster rate than Oregon, we're going to start to realize diminishing returns. Right, our gross margin within that region are going to start to diminish over time. So now we can play a little bit more strategic and try to figure out where to pinpoint and place customers. Another example is, at Tealium, we're a growing business. We're continuing to lock in larger deals, larger customers. We're building new products. Our use cases are changing. So during that sales cycle, we can actually understand during a POC what our customer volume is going to be. And if we know that they have a 3-month ramp-up time between signature for the contract until they're actually using our product at full scale, then I need to go back and revise my forecast and add additional spend. We're currently working through re-architecting our tagging policy to break apart our system and really better understand it. And with a better understanding of how our system behaves, we can improve our system and contractual guardrails to not only protect our customers, but protect us as a software provider. As we're optimizing, we're reducing usage, we're reducing spend. Now we need to go back and right-size our contractual commits. And this is way more than just RIs. This is any other software that hits our gross margins that is correlated to our AWS spend. And as an organization, we can use all of this knowledge to continue investing in building scalable and profitable products.
So if you had maybe a quick summary for the team here, 3 key takeaways, non-technical, that have really led to your success operating FinOps in such a demanding and dynamic environment, what would you share?
Yeah, so these 3 categories are what I classify as the non-technical things that allowed us to operate a successful FinOps practice at Tealium. I mentioned that we're re-architecting our tagging policy, and really the purpose behind that is to further improve the visibility of our product cost but at different layers, right? So I want to be able to know our cost by core product, sub-feature, and even usage type. And by presenting our data in these different layers, it'll allow us to know if a new idea would ever turn a profit at scale. So at Tealium, we have real examples where we actually shut down R&D initiatives because we've been able to prove out that this product will never make a profit. In addition, we can understand the cost bottlenecks of a feature, so I can provide my engineering team real live directional data as to where to go tackle the cost bottlenecks of that specific product so we can improve margins. And which kind of takes me to aligning the KPIs. So working in FinOps, you'll quickly realize that not all departments speak the same language and not all KPIs are relevant, right? My finance department, they care about gross margins, growth rates, cash flow planning, what's the forecast, and for me to be able to explain the variance. I work in FinOps, I'm responsible for delivering healthy gross margins and cost control. So I care about the velocity of money, right? What's the payback period and the return on my upfront? What's the freeload factor and the carried risk of any commits that I'm making? Is there going to be a shortfall at the tail end? What's the sensitivity of my spend? So I can continue to deliver a reliable forecast every month? My engineering department, they care more about the operational metrics, right? What's the data loss percentage and the uptime? So as an organization, we had to really come up with a common denominator that makes sense to not just me, but every other department at the firm, which we actually call CPM, our cost per million events. And this indicates our cost for data volume, and we can split that up by data coming in and data going out. And this KPI helps us answer a lot of questions across the organization, so we can understand our margin by customer, margin by hosted region, and we can use all this information to get better direction and alignment with the way revenue is going. And really, the last thing I'll add here is just the collaboration part, right? We're all pretty involved here at Tealium. I run a weekly margin improvement meeting with engineering to discuss very technical system improvement opportunities. I run a monthly margin review with my C-suite to discuss CapEx heavy projects, any changes to the forecast, and for me to be able to explain the variance. And I think the most impactful one is that at least one person from each core department is engaged in any new product design, development, pricing strategies, et cetera. So by the time we take a product to market, every department has their stamp of approval.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing all this. Hopefully this is helpful for you to see sort of the collaboration between the technical stakeholders and leaders in the business and FinOps, how these guys work together to achieve these outcomes and really improve their standing and margin in the market. With that, we've got about 5-ish minutes left, and we're open for questions.
First, let's give them a big round of applause for doing this. It's always a little nerve-wracking to get up here and give speeches, and you guys did a wonderful job. But are there any questions? Don't make me sing it, but I will. Okay, come on over. Hold on. We're not running, really. Can you guys pass this down?
I have 2 questions. What's your success rate on right sizing? And the second question is, in your graph, you showed a lot of percentage on spot instances, around 34-35%. Is it that these workloads are development workloads, they are meant to be for running on spot?
So I'll answer the success on right sizing. You want to go for the latter half of that?
Yeah, you want to talk about the large percentage on spot, and I'll kind of get to the...
Right. Yeah. So one of the tricks with that, and if you saw, like Ricky demonstrated, like 55% of our cost coming from spot is it's really in being able to design your systems that you can run very ephemeral workloads, right? And so we take advantage of anything that doesn't have a level of persistence or doesn't have a risk at scaling up and down. There's a few tiers in there that we would like to be able to scale back and forth and take advantage of the spot market. The other, I guess, lower risk factor, the thing that eliminates some of the risk is the ability to use spot with, or NetApp spot with that. Not to get that confused, but with NetApp spot with that, that if there isn't a spot market available, we fall back to on-demand. But the result of that is that on-demand that gets used in there is part of our savings plan. So we benefit from that, and that's why that on-demand number is even lower. But to get a little closer to what you're asking about success and right scaling, it's really hard to answer that. We don't necessarily track that number. Again, cost is a huge factor for that. But what we do is, if we were on a project, for example, and we feel like it can be run on a leaner tier, or we can run less instances of it, we will go through, for lack of a better term, I don't want to call it experimenting. We're not like experimenting a prod, but we're running basically safe controlled scaling or changes within the environment, and then we go back later and then we look at the cost before and after, and that's how we kind of analyze the success rate on that. And again, that's really, some go well, some don't, and then we go back to the drawing board and we do it again. So, but I would say more times than not, we're successful. So.
Just to add one thing, what he said, and utilization of spot instances, you kind of pegged it right? Spot instances are ephemeral and risky potentially, and you wouldn't necessarily want to put production workloads on those. But that's really what we help with. That's a really core value of the spot platform is managing and understanding those spot markets so we can predict and replace those ahead of that recall. So we make those more high service tier for you guys.
Yeah, there's a little bit of it's a little scary thinking like, oh, hey, you might just rip away my instances, but they put telemetry in there that tell you that you can basically do any of your shutdown procedures for an event. So we're actually able to stop processes and everything in time before it actually goes away. So that helps a lot. So.
Okay, any other questions? I thought I saw another hand. Over here, hold on. Walk behind the camera.
Two questions as well. First, can you describe the normalized rate that the graph, how do you get the normalized per EC2 instance, I think you had?
Yeah, so the cost per normalized unit is just, so on AWS, where AWS ran, so on AWS, an EC2 instance has a normalization factor, which is the size. I don't remember how it starts, but I know they're in increments of 4 or 8 or something like that. So all you can do is, a 16XL equates to X number of normalized units. The 2XL is a division of that. So as a whole, you can take your overall cost divided by the total units of measure that you're actually using, which gets you to that KPI.
Okay, you do that straight in the CUR, like the cost and usage report?
Yeah, so I'm actually extracting it directly from the CUR. There's a value in there that you can add to your data set that actually has that for you. Or you can just manually, calculate that with a simple script. It's not. It's a pretty simple value. Yep.
Okay. All right. I forgot the other ones.
Yeah.
All right, I'm coming over there. Hold on, I'm coming to you. One moment, and this we still have time for a couple more questions. So hold on.
Are you referring to in RI case in AWS called size flexible? That's how they calculate. Like, okay, if I'm saying RDS 4x large, it will be size flexible. I could use 2 of the 2x larges or 4 of the 1x large. Is that the unit that you are referring to as a normalized unit?
So that's a good example of the normalization factor. Same concept. EC2, I know the normalization factor count is different than RDS, but what you're referring to is you can vertically scale and that RI actually covers it. So that's actually true. And by doing that, by breaking it apart in that manner, you can actually get better coverage.
Okay.
And utilization.
Okay. My next question about going back to that chart that where I saw over a period of time by April 2023, I see it went to 55% utilization of the spot, and same time I noticed the trend of savings plan is linearly like that one are reduced. Is it a specific reason that savings plan that probably you are covering across the board for lambdas and other reason that savings plan is increasing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm actually happy that you pointed that out. So within that chart, what you were looking at was that when we started, savings plan was 19 percentage points. And by April of 2023, I believe it went up to like 23%. And really that was because as we were working through the optimization and the right sizing, our usage decreased. But when we started in September, we had 19% just as a base layer of 3-year no upfronts on savings plan. Again, preservation of cash. Cash is king in this environment, right? So as our usage decreased, that percentage became a bigger pool of our overall usage. So we didn't actually purchase more. It was just the coverage actually increased as the number of units decreased. Yeah.
And that is like perfect timing there. I don't know how much time you have left on there, but I think
We're
we're
good.
good. Perfect. All right, everybody, please, let's give them one big round of applause one more time. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for watching that session. I'm sitting here in San Diego right after FinOps X. We hope you join us next year here live 2024. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and join the community. Get involved, join the summits, get in a working group, and don't forget to get FinOps certified. Because next year here in San Diego for FinOps X, it's going to be twice as big. Come join the party. Come meet your people. Welcome home.